which is Canada's oldest professional Indigenous theatre company.
Thank you and welcome. Ilka and Verena.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Ilka Saal. I'm from Germany, from the city of, well, I teach at the University of Erfurt. I live in the city of Leipzig. I learned about CCTA from Chantal at a drama conference in Austria and liked the idea very much. So I reached out to my colleague, Marina Lashinger, and together we put on a series of plays together with our students who were all non-theater students. So we did this with students from all sorts of disciplines.
Yeah, and I'm Verena Laschinger, also from the University of Erfurt. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'm usually more into literature and photography of climate change, but I jumped on the occasion and it was such a great experience to do this series of climate change theater with Ilka Saal and the students.
Thank you. So now I want to give our wonderful guests a chance to tell you more about their events, the ones that they organized in 2019 and perhaps the ones they're planning for 2021. And I'd love to hear from each of you also maybe some of the highlights or challenges you encountered in organizing your event. And I'm going to start first with Carissa and Vivian from Iowa State University.
Thank you, Chantal, and the whole team at the Arctic Cycle. We're so thrilled to be here and to be able to share our experiences and to encourage other people to participate in climate change theater action. It's been a really rich experience for our university, and we're really happy to help others get on board and figure out how they can make the best of this. So as I said, I teach at Iowa State University and run the Eco Theater Lab, which produces readings, theater actions, plays, performances, and workshops that engage audiences in conversations about environmental and social justice issues. We're going to share a few photographs of our 2017 and 2019 productions of climate change theater action. We'll show some rehearsal photos, performance photos, some of our outreach and community engagement efforts. And feel free to ask us more questions about any of these later if you like, but we're going to talk about the productions and our actions as we go. So in 2017, the Eco Theater Lab did CCTA as a small independent project, and Vivian and myself were the primary producers. We did an open call for actors and crew, and we had a lot of students respond, many from disciplines other than theater, who are interested in the sciences, in climate change studies, community development, etc. We also had alumni and community members come on board to be part of our team. We had a tiny budget. We essentially bartered for all our production needs, and we just rehearsed outside on the campus grounds because we didn't really have access to facilities. And then we created partnerships with several other university and community organizations to make sure that we were spreading the word about the work that we were doing. We did performances outdoors on campus, and we also performed at our local public library. And our one major action for 2017 was a sustainability resource fair, which included representatives from about 20 local organizations who displayed information and talked with audience members at intermission and after the performances about the ways that they could get involved locally with sustainability efforts, environmental initiatives, and how to get more informed about the issues that faced our local community.
And during our 2017 production, then ISU Theater, the ISU Theater Department was one of our primary partners, and several members of the theater department came to check out the show and the event and the Sustainability Resource Fair. And then when 2019 came along, then they generously offered to feature climate change theater action as the first main stage production of their 2019 to 2020 season. So we're going to show a few pictures from that production now. Again, Carissa and I worked as to help produce the 2019 event, and I directed again. And you can see some of our team members here. Because we had the substantial support from ISU Theater, who became kind of the primary producer for this event, then their generous support for the project meant that we did have a budget this time around, which provided some new opportunities, though we were still frugal and adhered to green theater practices as much as we possibly could. This also meant that we had more performing arts students as actors who joined the project this time because of our close partnership with ISU Theater. We also expanded our production team significantly from our 2017 version, increasing the potential for collaboration. Our team included ISU Theater staff and publicity coordinators, some incredible designers and technical director whose work that you can see in some of these photos of the performance at the University Theater, and a wonderful stage manager, assistant director, assistant community outreach coordinator, and dramaturg. So we had a lot more hands and brains working on the project this time around, which just meant that it was a little bit different than the first time. And we also again partnered with several university and local organizations and with Sustainability Resource Fair representatives. And then we also sought a small grant from a state organization. So in terms of our actions in 2019, we were able to expand our actions to not only include the Sustainability Resource Fair, like Carissa talked about for 2017, and here you can see 2019's Resource Fair, some images of that, but we were also able to create a youth matinee study guide focused on youth climate activists around the world to distribute to our youth audience members. We were also able to do touring performances outside of the University Theater at the local library, as well as outdoors, which was a lot of fun. And these featured also original and local performance and visual artwork to add to our selections from the amazing commission plays we were able to produce. And then we also had dramaturgy displays about the local effects of climate change, what we are doing and what we can do in Ames and Iowa. And our dramaturg was Taylor Squinar, also a member of the Eco Theater Lab, and he's here today, so some of y'all might be able to talk to him about some of his dramaturgy work. This also included climate platforms for upcoming elections for candidates, and we hosted a symposium panel conversation with local climate experts and activists after one of the performances that we invited audience members to. So you can see people here at the symposium panel engaging in conversations about the art as well as about climate action in our community. And finally, the Climate Change Theater Action team made appearances at other climate and community events to support the work that's already existing in our community. So at the National Campus Sustainability Day, at local library events, and at climate strikes, as is pictured here. And then we also had the wonderful opportunity to participate in Brooke Wood's research that we wanted to give a shout out to because she did some amazing work.
One of the challenges that we faced in both iterations of our project was balancing the performance preparation with our community and outreach efforts. We see the performance as one of the actions, not the primary action. And it's a way to draw people in and begin the conversation. So balancing that time in rehearsal and preparation and production with doing all the community outreach is one of the things that we continue to try to navigate. How do we make sure that we build a team that will allow us to do the most effective outreach, the most effective engagement, and really make sure that Climate Change Theater Action is creating conversation and leading to further action in our community.
And then even though our 2017 and 2019 productions were very different from each other, and we expect our 2021 production to be as well, we think that they were also effective in very different ways because of this. So we think one of the primary reasons for this is that in 2017, we began to really learn how to approach this kind of community engaged art from an asset-based perspective, where instead of building our events entirely based on kind of a preconceived vision of what it should be, we instead built our events based on the resources and people and talents and partners who were part of our team at that given time. So we tried to invite as many people and partners from different backgrounds and disciplines and perspectives into the process. And then we discovered together what we could build from those existing assets and how we could contribute to climate engagement efforts that were already alive and well in our community, and how we could help kind of bridge gaps that may exist between community members and those efforts. And we hope to continue to explore what this kind of asset-based process looks like as we begin preparing for our 2021 event in Ames. So this month, the City of Ames is kicking off a climate action planning process. So our city plans to announce our consultants for that process just in about 10 days. So we've been really looking forward to that, and we plan to focus our 2021 Climate Change Theater Action event on contributing to community engagement efforts in support of this process, and also prioritizing youth engagement even more than we've been able to in the past. We're hoping that can be a part of the process as well. So thank you so much. We are so looking forward to talking more with y'all during the Q&A and in the breakout rooms, and to learn from your experiences as well. And thank you to Chantal and Julia and the whole CCTA team, as always, for inviting us today and for your tremendous support for this work.
And we'll look forward to answering any questions and providing what support we can to other folks who want to get involved in this project. Thank you.
Thank you both. It's really amazing to hear you talk about these things and to see more of the photos. I mean, I know we ask for feedback and you send us stuff in writing, but it's like, I see more of the amplitude, like the scope of what you organize now that I hear you talk about it than I did just reading what you did. So this is amazing. Thank you. Now I'm going to pass it on to Keith, if you want to talk about what you did and maybe what some of the highlights and challenges were.
Keith, so sorry. I think you're muted.
Is that better?
There we go. Thank you.
Thank you. I was just saying, I wasn't saying anything important at that point. So, but I am saying something now. And I'd just like to say that I acknowledge all the elders on this call. In terms of your contributions to these conversations and that, just wanted to do a shout out for that. So Native Earth is Canada's oldest professional Indigenous theatre company. And we were lucky enough, I feel like I need to talk a little bit about where we came from in order to talk about where we got to with this. We were lucky enough to be chosen as one of the participants in something called The Cycle, which is a trilogy of 2-year research initiatives on a bunch of different topics. And this one was on climate change. And it was through the Canadian National Arts Centre in Ottawa. And so we were brought to Banff, Alberta, where scientists, activists, artists, and change makers were brought together to talk about our complicity, our responsibilities, our roles, what we're doing, and what the conversations are for us in responding to climate change. When we were there, I heard Ian, Garrett, and Chantal speak about what they were doing with climate change theater action. And so for us as an artist, I was immediately excited about it. And then as an artistic director, even more so. Especially when I found out that there were 4 Canadian Indigenous artists who had written pieces for that year's cohort. So when I got back to Toronto, overwhelmed by everything that had happened, there was a really exciting conversation about how we engage public. And I spoke to our team about adding the plays to we have an annual development festival of new Indigenous work. It's called Wasaugatuck Begins to Dance. This year will be its 34th incarnation. And it's a lot of work is like, I always say, it's scripts in hand, playwrights, creators, dancers, everyone's creating for a number of days, and work in progress gets put on stage. And we felt like this was an exciting time because we could experiment with these pieces. So for us, it was a no-brainer because Indigenous artists have been engaging with these issues and this work for, in the 34 years, of the festival, tons of work had been done prior to this of these conversations around the land about our responsibility, about being stewards. So to me, it was exciting to be able to bring these pieces into the theater. And we have a 120 seat black box theater in downtown Toronto in Regent Park, which is the highest density multicultural demographic in all of Toronto. It was the largest public housing initiative in the 1960s, and we were right in the middle of it. We have a little theater there. So we were excited to engage with public, but then also the artists that were involved. And so what we did was we felt it was important that we start every night. So we did our 4 most important nights. Our most popular nights are Friday and Saturdays of the 2 weeks of the 2-week festival. And so we started each night with one of the readings, one of the plays. So the Friday night we had a play, the Saturday night we had a play. And then also at the very beginning, we also invited Ian Garrett to come in and talk about the initiative, to talk about what climate change theater action was. And just so that people had an idea of the artists sitting in, because we had a lot of artists that are also sitting in the audiences, and the idea that they could engage with this work as well. And who do we use? So what we did is the festival, because we have so much, we have 2 weeks worth of work. It's usually 3 to 4 pieces a night. We have an ensemble of between 20 and 40 Indigenous actors of all different age ranges, senior artists and emerging and new artists to the community. And so we have this ensemble, and we brought them in and used them as artists to read with the playwrights. In some of those playwrights, one is in Vancouver, Corey Payet, Yvette Nolan's in Saskatchewan. So they weren't able to join us, but we were able to get them in on Skype at the time and to engage with the work. And what we also did is we brought in Indigenous artist by the name of Clayton Windat. We just said Clayton is kind of like outside of the circle of theater. He does a lot of performance art stuff, and he's just got a big heart. And so I was like, I want to bring Clayton in and just see what he does with them. And so we just said, the world is your oyster. Come in, do whatever you want to do. And each of these pieces, gave him the 4 pieces. We told him the casting, and then he had rehearsals where he could just play and he could do anything he wanted to do. And so, yeah, it was, the first Friday night we had a piece by Yvette Nolan called Breathing Space. And that was the one that Ian talked before. And then what we have is also it's called a Two-Spirit Cabaret. And it's the LGBTQ, it's a partnership with Buddies in Bad Times Theater in Toronto, which is the queer theater in Toronto. And so we have this partnership where we come in, we do this cabaret of Two-Spirit work. And Yolanda Bonnell, who's Two-Spirited, we opened the cabaret with her piece. Yeah, it went really well. Like, it was really exciting. It's a night like no other, where it's like you have a cabaret audience show up. And so they were really excited, and there was lots of energy in the room. So that was really great. And then we waited the next week. And then again, we had Nibi by Corey Payet, who's Ojibwe, and he lives out in Vancouver. And we had his piece. And then we had the closing night. We had David Gary, who is actually a New Zealander, who's a Maori. And he closed, he was the first piece of the closing night, which was really exciting. Yeah. And so we had a really great response. So we go out, we do a land acknowledgement every night. We talk about the festival. We talk about the work people are going to see. I usually go out there with my managing director, Isaac Thomas. We go and engage the audience. And then we got to talk about climate change, talk about the initiative, talk about what these pieces meant, and about the artists. We had each one of the artists kind of give their comment about how they felt about the piece and why they wrote it. And so we shared that with people. To me, I was like, they asked, one highlight for us was that so many people came up to us and wanted to engage about it, talk about it, were excited about it. They were like, what was that? Like, what is this thing? And, lots of people hadn't heard about it. And so we were able to like loop people in and have artists be excited about that work and about talking about climate change. I would say one challenge for us was that the director, because I showed up and said, you can do anything you want, everything. And it's, let us know what you need budget wise. Like we can roll with you, whatever. And I think he felt overwhelmed at that moment. Each piece is very different. And I felt like because he felt he had all the choices, he made none of the choices because he was like, I don't know. And then he was like, I feel a responsibility. I don't want to use anything on stage that is not recyclable. That isn't this, that isn't, he's like, and so on one level, he's like, I actually feel it needs to be bare stage, bare nothing. Like not even, everyone's going to use their phones. Like it was that kind of idea. So he actually pulled back on a lot of things. We were like, you have this whole theater, you can do whatever. Yeah, and then for us, for anything moving forward, we were really excited. The plan is to keep doing it. They're short pieces. The festival runs over a number of nights. These pieces have been written. Indigenous artists are talking about this stuff already. So we were like, for us, it's again, a no-brainer to be able to continue engaging with this work because it gets a lot of response from our audiences, but also the artists really feel like this is an important thing that needs to be talked about. For me, my own thing is that I wrote one for last year. I was so excited about it that I actually submitted one and wrote one. It's in this year's cohort, and encouraged lots of other people, a lot of other artists to do it, like to submit something and to be excited about these conversations. So yeah, and I'm willing to talk about, and if anyone has any questions about it, more than willing to answer. So yeah, Chimigwich.
Thank you, Keith. And of the, I'm really glad that you wrote a piece for this year, which is one of the pieces I love. And of the artists you mentioned, some are returning. Yvette Nolan is also with us this year. Corey Payet is also with us.
I think Yolanda also written another one?
Yolanda, she was going to, but then she had to drop out this year. So next time, 2023.
But the nice thing is Yvette Nolan is a former artistic director of Native Earth Performing Arts. I worked as her as an artistic associate before I became. So she continued on as a playwright, and she's brilliant if anyone gets a chance to read her stuff.
Yeah, and I saw go by in the chat that David Geary was with us. So hi, David.
I love David's piece. If anyone gets a chance to read it, it's
hello everyone. Kia ora, Keith. Thanks.
Hey, good to hear your voice.
Thank you. So I'm going to pass it on to Ilka and Verena from Germany.
Okay, thank you. Verena is also going to share her screen and show some photos. Well, we come from a very, very different direction, a rather non-artistic direction. It's been really impressive to hear the experiences from Iowa and Toronto. As we said, we are professors of literature, of American literature. Verena has an interest in photography and literature with regard to climate change and also the Anthropocene. And I focus on theater, drama, and performance, but rather from a theoretical perspective. And I'm also very interested in political theater. But what we share is that both of us like to explore alternative forms of teaching. So when we learned of CCTA, we eagerly seized this opportunity and put together a general education course. We have this possibility at our university where students from different disciplines come together to work on a subject with the goal to put on a series of these short plays. The participants, if you could go to the next slide, Verena, the participants worked in groups, each selected one play and had to come up with their own staging concept. So they had to decide on the format, whether to do a classical form, whether to do a form of invisible theater or a flash mob. They also had to decide on their targeted audience, whether they wanted to perform for students at the university or the general public of the city of Erfurt, and then to pick their location for the performance as well as to publicize the event. So the students were really in charge, and we just guided them, gave them some pointers, assisted them where we could. In total, we had a group of 18 students. The majority of them were white, of German descent and female. And there were 2 international students, 3 persons of color, and 1 male student, actually. We started late since we are tied to the semester, and the semester in Germany only starts in mid-October. So that's when we started. And then the performances took place in mid-December. Marina, we can't hear you.
All right, I'm going to start all over. Okay, so we actually started the series of climate change theater action with a flash mob version of Chantal's It Starts With Me on November 20. And we did that at noon. And this group of students performed it in the commercial city center with the intention to make people stop in their tracks. They had chosen this play because of its feminist perspective on climate crisis, highlighting how climate change particularly affects women in the global south. So in the wake of natural disasters, women are more often victims of sexual violence. When their families are forced to leave home, it is often women who are left behind, and more women die than men in the tsunami, for example, because they had to help children and elderly members of their families to get away. And also, one thing that we don't usually think about is that their long traditional clothes often make escape more difficult. So the students felt that these facts, especially from a German perspective, were really underrepresented in the media discourse about climate change. The second play was Birthday Suit by Marianne Carana and was performed on December 12th, again outdoors at a tramway stop at Domplatz Erfurt, which is at the city center again. And this time the students chose the play because they were intrigued with a prostitute character, Pam, who meets an environmental activist in a prison cell, and these two very unlike characters engage in a debate about climate change. This time the students used a few simple props and a very reduced stage design, performed the play in German translation, pretty much amidst the hustle and bustle on the street. And we're going to talk about what that actually did at some later point. The third play, called Appealing by Paula Sismar, took place on December 10 at the International Cafe at the University of Erfurt. And this group sought very intentionally a quiet, attentive, and English-speaking crowd in a setting resembling stage theater. So the students performed as two journalists discussing which photographs to pick as illustrations for an article. And one of them wants appealing images of environmental catastrophes, where the others, whereas the other finds them fake and would rather show the truth, no matter how horrifying. This play, I guess, resonated with the students because they feel that as visual consumer products, very highly aestheticized, eco photographs, glossy, large formatted, are very often rather obscuring the dangers of climate change than doing anything to activate people. So moving on to the next performance, again, one that took place at the university campus in a cafe. It was The Arrow by Abhishek Majumdar, again in on December 11. And this time the performance took place at noon, and there were about 80 people milling about the cafe at the time of the performance. The play itself dwells on two indigenous brothers who debate whether to give up on their land as they struggle against ruthless authorities and corporations. And in the end, they decide for war, despite the fact that they only have bows and arrows as weapons, but they are ready to sacrifice their lives in order to protect their ancestral land from further exploitation. The students, I guess, chose this play because one of them, self-identifying as a person of color, has relations to this part of the world, and they felt that this would really be a very strong contribution. All right, and the last one was actually Marcus Youssef's play Dust, and it attracted students because of its fictional character, and it has a very futuristic setup that doesn't right away reveal the climate activist message, and they found that really intriguing. So the group staged the play in a pitch dark university auditorium during a lecture break, and pretty much taking everyone except the professor by surprise with their intervention. The performance made use of audio recordings, light effects, fluorescent liquids, which you can see in the image here, and was likely the most sophisticated and also the most ambitious project in our series. And the audience was clearly affected by this performance.
Yeah, in general, we can say that we had a very committed group of students. They were already quite aware of issues surrounding climate change, and including issues of place, gender, race, class, and intersectionalities. And notably, quite a few students were already involved with activist organizations such as Greenpeace and Fridays for Future, sorry. So the focus of our workshops actually was not so much on education on climate issues, but on exploring theater as a form of disseminating knowledge, of raising awareness, and ideally mobilizing the audience to action. In terms of theater, this was very much an amateur endeavor. I mean, we had no resources at all, no theater space, no technology, no money, and very, very little experience, but a lot of enthusiasm. So the biggest surprise for us, for Verena and me, and maybe also for the students, was the team spirit that emerged from this very basic minimalistic theatrical endeavor. We had a lot of very intense and challenging, but also very productive conversations. And I think in the process, all of us really, really learned a lot from each other. So this was really the highlight. There were two major challenges that we struggled with. One was how to reach the public outside the university. Several groups actually endeavored precisely that. They found it very important to leave the ivory tower to go off campus. And they came up with staging concepts, right? Such as the flash mob for It Starts With Me, or minimalist street theater for Birthday Suit. And they were not afraid to take their pieces into the city center, into public spaces such as the shopping mall or a streetcar stop or the market. But as you see here in this picture, what they encountered was a predominantly white, non-English speaking and advanced age audience who either attempted to ignore the performance or perceived it as an irritant in their daily routines. At some point, 3 older people literally walked across the stage during a performance simply because they would not accept that something was put in their way. To a certain extent, irritation is precisely what our students were aiming for, to interrupt the Christmas shopping. It coincided with the Christmas season, right? And to halt the busy life in a cafe. And in this regard, these performances did work. But engaging the audience on the level of content proved to be more difficult. And here we discuss possibilities, for instance, of translations into German, as well as references into German, into a cultural context that would be more available to our targeted audience. And in fact, 2 authors consented that we could make a translation of their plays. This was Arrow and The Birthday Suit. And the other issue that we also encountered was the question of cultural appropriation. Many plays focus on structural inequities of climate change related to class, race, gender, but also location. And in our workshop discussion, several participants, so it was interestingly the students, pointed out the irony of the relative privileged position of most participants in this endeavor and problematized the performance of otherness and structural inequality in a predominantly white, northern middle-class context. And in fact, this is an issue that we would very much like to talk with the other participants in today's meetup about how to go about this, especially since the language challenge is also added to that, right? Since we are mostly working with non-English speaking audiences.
So by a generous estimate, the 5 performances that we put out there reached an audience maybe of about 350 people. And many of these, particularly the spectators of performances that were done as invisible theater or the flash mob style, I guess they did not quite realize what was going on, but at least they were stopped in their tracks for a moment. But there were others, and they actually engaged in conversations with the performers. They asked questions about the performance. They took home flyers and info leaflets. And I guess in the process of putting these short performances together, it left quite an impact, not just on Ilka and me, but also on the students. It confronted them, as Ilka has already said, with questions of privilege, intersectionality, translation, but also cultural appropriation, and maybe above all, dissemination. On the positive end of this, the students actually received an invitation to the European Youth event in Strasbourg in May 2020, and they were invited to share their experience, but also to present Dust again. The meeting was, alas, cancelled due to the outbreak of the pandemic. This was really very unfortunate, but Ilka and I, at least, will enter into a second round of climate change theater action this fall, and we are looking forward to learning about other people's experiences with these plays, and we're also very much looking forward to helping everyone who's willing to engage in the same or a similar experience, and are about to facilitate CCTA 2021 in Erfurt. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you both. It's interesting. So I have one question. When they performed outside, did they do one performance or they did several of each play?
They did just one. So so each group performed once, actually, and that was it.
Okay.
That was their intervention. Actually, we did think about maybe putting together an evening of all plays together. That would have been nice, but then actually the semester ended and the pandemic hit, and basically it was very difficult to continue this work at this moment.
Yeah, I'm impressed at I mean, not being a performer myself, I'm impressed about anybody who steps up on a stage, but to like go on the street where people are not there to listen to you, it's even more brave, I think. Thank you. So I'm going to open it up to questions to both people who are on the Zoom call with us and to people who might be watching on the YouTube live stream. If you want to put your questions in the chat, we have Julia and Gigi are helping us track these questions, and we can pass them on to our guests. Anything for any of our guests right now about the events that they put together. In a few minutes, you'll have a chance, we'll go, for those of us on Zoom, we'll go into breakout rooms, so you'll have a chance to talk more. But for now, any questions you want to pose, you're welcome. And I can't quite keep track of the chat, but do you want to jump on, Julia, if there's anything that is ready to be asked?
Sure. Something quick for Ilka and Verena. What was the class called and how is it described to the students?
Verena, do you?
It was
I
called.
What we called it.
We called it CCTA Theater Action, and as Ilka said, it was a general education course. And what was the second part of the question? Sorry.
How was it described to the students? Like, how was the course pitched?
As a hands-on workshop for everyone who is willing to engage in this very exciting project, who brings experience either from the theater side or the climate activist side, or none of those. So basically the idea was to get people engaged in this sort of activist work. Very open.
It sounds like at both universities, you worked with students who were coming from a number of disciplines, right? They were not all from the theater or all from one discipline. That's great.
That's right. It was interdisciplinary.
We have another question, a general question about CCTA 2021 from Jean. Will interested people have access to the plays this year? Same as 2019. And I can answer that briefly, that if you have not yet, you can email us at ccta@thearcticcycle.org. We can put that in the chat. And that expresses your interest in participating this year. And then we will, Chantal and I will write you back to give you access to the 2021 plays. And I see another question from Joan Robbins. Could Vivian and Carissa talk a bit more about the Sustainability Resource Fair, who participated, how did it go, etc.?
Yes, we definitely can. So this is something we did in 2017 and 2019, and it was partially our kind of the impetus behind it was thinking of what action we wanted to do, and also recognizing that as several of the panelists talked about, that we may be coming at this project from different perspectives, and that while we have a lot of interest and have done a lot of reading and that sort of thing on climate action and sustainability efforts, our primary area, I guess, is in theater and in the arts. So how could we bring in as much expertise as we could into this project from people in the community who are already doing this work, that we're not starting this work, but how can we use climate change theater action as a tool to get people involved in what's already happening. So we reached out to campus organizations, both student organizations and campus programs that focus on sustainability efforts and getting students involved, faculty and staff involved, community members involved. And then we also reached out to local organizations, primarily in the city itself. So local organizations that focus on sustainability, but also several organizations in the county and in the state that provide opportunities for people to get directly involved in sustainability efforts kind of immediately. So how we structured that was we had our events with the performances, and in our performances, we decided both years to do kind of we selected several so that it would be almost a full-length show, so that we're inviting people in from who expect to see shows from the theater community. But then what we did is we had Sustainability Resource Fair participants available before the show, and then we had half of the performances.
Do you want to listen?
And then we had, during intermission, we had an extended intermission where Sustainability Resource Fair participants basically tabled in the lobby and outside and all of that. And we encouraged all audience members to go talk to the Sustainability Fair representatives, figure out what they were interested in, what's going on, how they could get involved, what actions were coming up. And then they were available afterwards as well. Carissa, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, we also encouraged our actors to be part of the conversation in intermission. So during intermission, they also went and talked to folks at the Sustainability Resource Fair, both people tabling and audience themselves.
Pretty subtle.
And so our actors were part of that conversation. We wanted the audience to see them not just as performers, but as activists and as folks who had some knowledge about the work that we were trying to do, and also to see everyone who was part of the process as approachable and as potential people to have a conversation or discussion with, or to start an initiative with, or get more information from. So we wanted that to feel that it was really equitable and inclusive. We also tried to include, as Vivian said, hands-on type things in our Sustainability Resource Fair. And you probably saw from some of the pictures that we extended our set design in this latest production into the lobby itself. And so we literally had huge plastic bags full of plastic and trash hanging over the heads of the participants while they were going through the Sustainability Resource Fair. And in our first iteration, 2017, there were things just laying out on the sidewalks, and the sidewalks were chalked, and the information was literally all around you. And that's part of what we wanted to create, was a sense that this is, that the resources and the potential to participate and collaborate are everywhere.
Thank you. Julia, do we have maybe one more question before we go into breakout rooms?
Sure, yeah. Just sorry that we won't get to answer everyone's aloud, but see that the chat is really active, and there'll be more time for discussion in the smaller breakout rooms. So I want to lift up this question about funding and budgeting for your events. So Clara asks, what folks who had funding found to be the most useful application of funds that folks might consider fundraising for specifically. And then for folks working without budgets, or I know Carissa and Vivian, you touched on this in your presentation, and there are also some responses from other participants in the chat. So yeah, application of funding, how best to go about setting up your budget for your events.
Maybe, Keith, can I ask you, since you were working already within a structure, so did you raise outside funding, or did you work with the funds you already had for your season?
Yeah, we get funding through Heritage Canada, which is one of our federal funders. For us, it became really important that the artists get the majority of any money spent on it. That was part of Clayton saying, like, I don't want to spend money on any set or any, like, even props, or I don't want photocopies. I want everyone on their phone. And so he's like, and all the savings we do get, I would like it to go to the writers and the artists. And so then we honored that and did that.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Mm.
Ilka and Verena, you said you worked with no money essentially, right? Do you have anything to add?
I think the only cost we had was like 120 euros for photocopies and paper and things like this. And yeah, we just worked that through the university budget. But yeah, we were very minimalist, very bare stage. And but the students were very inventive. So they would bring props, portable props from home, right, for the street performances. And other than that, for instance, we also tried to have performances that didn't need much, overhead, such as the flash mob.
Thanks. It's a great example, actually, that budget doesn't necessarily equals impact, right? You can do a lot without money just by doing the bare minimum. And that's one of the things we like about the program, is that anybody can pick it up and do something with the resources that they have. They don't go looking, they can, but they don't have to go looking for a lot of resources. Vivian and Carissa, did you want to add anything to this question, this budget question?
Yeah, and Carissa, you can jump in too. For 2017, we were in the same situation where we didn't have any budget at all, and I would just echo those points. Yes, we spent less than $100 the first time and underspent our budget in 2019, primarily because we were trying to focus on green theater practices, which also in a lot of ways meant that we were underusing our budget in 2019, even though the University Theater provided us with a budget. But for instance, the set that Carissa mentioned, it was a pretty expansive set design, but most of it was obtained by having people bring in their trash, their used plastics and all of that then our set designer, Rob Sunderman, worked with to create the set. So those sorts of practices. And then in 2017, I think those sorts of constraints do breed a lot of creativity. So I would echo what's been said about when we didn't have any money at all, that it was just focusing on what we did have and then just building it from there. And that worked, I think, pretty well.
Thank you.
And we also tried to recycle back. And so even with our tiny budget in 2017, part of that was spent on buying blankets from Goodwill that people could sit on in the grass. But then we donated those blankets to the youth and shelter services in our local community. And so we tried to move things back. And with a lot of the set pieces from 2019, we also tried to make sure we were recycling and putting things back where they could be of use again.
And that reminds me, there was an event, I think it was in 2019, and I don't remember where it was exactly, but there was a group that for admission, they asked people to bring non-perishable food. That was the way to enter to see the show. And then they took this food and they donated it to food bank afterwards. So another way of being creative. So for people who are with us on YouTube, we're going to stop the live stream here because we're going to move into breakout rooms and have conversation with smaller groups. So everybody out there, thank you for attending, and we're very happy you were with us, and I hope you got some good tips out of this presentation. For people who are in the group with us, we're going to break into